let me tell you, I learned a lot on this podcast. Things I didn't know necessarily about our guest, things I didn't know necessarily about the world and music. But let's cut this music off. I'm sure somebody on there will recognize it, and I don't have the rights to it. So we're going to cut that off. But this is going to be a conversation. Really, I wanted to have a conversation with a good friend of mine, someone I worked with while in Japan. He's doing everything right, the way he wants to do it. This is Wade T Oberlin, self-identified as a married jester, as you'll hear. He's one of my most favorite people to talk to, though, because you really never know where the conversation's gonna go. Wade is very smart, he's eclectic, and he has a great taste in music. That's why I wanted to bring him on during National Record Store Day / month. He's former Navy, but he gives us a bit of a history lesson on the evolution of corporate radio, how the FM became the standard, and he tells us why he chooses to do the work, or rather volunteer, the way he does at an independent public radio station, and that is KSER up in Everett, Washington. We go from trapped in a submarine job to even into trapped in the closet. So yeah, believe it or not, R. Kelly comes up in this conversation, and that's the fun of it though, right? This is a lot of what you would get if you just sat down with Wade and I. He would just show up at the door with soy vanilla ice cream and some gluten-free waffles in hand. I didn't ask him to bring it, he brought it. That's kind of strange. But the truth is, I just wanted to have fun and get into a bit of his life in the Navy as well as what led him there. And of course, everything that he's been doing since he separated, from school, radio DJing, supporting local musicians, and all of that. And we'll have some things in the show notes that we discuss, but let's do it. Here's Wade T. Oberlin.
I remember being around base, and we had just finished a fun run. We had reported on a fun run at AFN, and they gave away a Ford Motor T-shirt.
Yes.
And
Yeah, I
it was
threw that
Ford
out
Motor
recently.
Racing. I still wear that out all the time.
They gave me like a large or an extra large
Yeah,
or something.
yeah. Oh yeah, mine is still pretty baggy. Yeah.
This is kind of like old times,
hmm
minus the waffles and ice cream, soy ice cream.
Right.
Those were good old days. Last I knew, you were going through some college classes and DJing at
Yeah.
a local station up in Everett, Washington. So,
hmm
can you catch me up from there? What have you been up to lately?
Well, both of those things have grown. I'm in currently my last full-time quarter of school. And I'm going to Shoreline Community College for an audio tech program for digital audio. My last two major classes are for a multi-track class where I use a console board, uh, just what you see in a general recording studio with a patch bay, and everything's pretty analog, but with a connection to Pro Tools as our recording program. And the secondary class is a Pro Tools editing class. And while last quarter we tackled doing like pretty much a lot of what we did at the local AFN, we did commercials and promos and PSAs and things like that, both for video and for audio. And so you get to recognize the differences in that. And for a class that's full of mostly musicians and people who want to work with musicians, they don't want to go near radio and television broadcasting as much. But me, I felt right at home. It felt like something very tangible. And then with radio, I'm still there, and I have to say it's one of those things where I really put my heart into. It's volunteer work, but since I've been there, I've now moved to two shows, uh, both at night. But I've grown closer with many of the volunteers there. I can now probably name about 40 to 50 of the people who work there, which feels really good. And we've also started a new program called Signal Boosters to further get our radio station out in the community. And for those that don't know, the radio station is called KSER, and it's mostly a progressive political radio station, but with many volunteer music related shows on it. So all sorts of different flavors, and not many of these stations exist that are outside of a university. So ours is completely run by donors and donations.
You're like a college station, right? But you're not associated with a school.
Well,
Is that what you're saying there?
no, the station is in no way related to a college.
Right, but
So
all volunteer.
yes, all volunteer. There's maybe 4 people who actually receive paychecks in our management. There's a board of directors and a few contractors who are on our engineering team. But as far as the music DJs go, I think there's one overlap where there's some management DJ, someone's double dipping. But I mean, but for the most part, yes, it operates a lot like a college station in that respect, in that there's a lot of volunteers. But it's more akin to WFMU or maybe KCRW, where the radio station is more of a free format and serves the community more than it does a university or something. And it's really interesting. They're a dying breed.
And so you're talking about progressive political
Mhm.
radio, but you don't get into that. You're strictly a music DJ, right?
Right. I'm strictly a music DJ.
And I know from listening to you and knowing you, you play some awesome music that most people probably have not heard. I think that word was avant-garde that we used to
Right.
toss around back in the day.
Well, it's definitely an acquired taste, and that's why I'm pushed back to about 10:30 at night. But that's good
You're like
because it's
The Carson Daily now with the last call. But
yeah,
you have
but it's
listeners, like
great.
especially up in that area, right? Like it's
Mhm.
Washington State. People are into that.
Yeah, people are into it, and I love all the late night programming that we have on our station because it really varies. We have one show that's very fixated on like prog rock and Frank Zappa, a real fixation with Frank Zappa, and then my show where I'll play a lot of more contemporary sounds now, most of it electronic or just sort of bizarre cross pollination genre stuff, and then throwbacks to like free jazz and just anything that I'm reading up on that day. It just seems like it would be fun to put out over the speakers into your car.
Yeah, that's right. Because you do read a lot about music history and music production. I know you've really immersed yourself in that entire culture in that field. How did you get into this volunteering? I know it's comfortable for you from the work you did at the American Forces Network in Japan, but how did you actually get into the radio station? And what made you say, "Oh, yeah, I'm cool with just volunteering my time and skills for this"?
It's definitely a multi-stage thing where first I moved to Everett, Washington with the Navy back in about 2011 or 2010 to be with the Abraham Lincoln, an aircraft carrier. And around that time, my music listening and my reading was pretty much to myself. I didn't really talk to too many people about it. But when I arrived at Everett, I'd started walking around downtown, which a lot of people didn't want to do because people think that Everett's kind of grimy. It has a nickname, Everett. If you've seen The Simpsons, the tire fire actually originated here. Um,
It's a
that's
fun
not a
little
joke.
fact there.
Yeah, and you can check out our website, Live in Everett, to find out all sorts of historical factoids like that. Um, but it really is great. And I walked past the radio station while I was living at the Everett Naval Base, and I thought, wow, that's very interesting. And what solidified my interest in Everett itself as a town was I walked past the historical Everett Theater, not too far from the actual radio station, and walked in on a show that was all young kids that just put a show together at the Everett Theater. And I stood in the back because I didn't know anybody. And there was a guy that did covers of Sugar Roast songs, and there was a two-piece up there that I swear was like half of the Stooges, and the show was called Rock'em Sock'em Locals, and I thought it was so cool that something like that was happening, kind of in this what appeared to me and to a lot of people like a real dingy town, and to me it made sense because I had read about Manchester music and how, Londoners look down on Manchester, right? But Manchester had this very fertile and very important, sort of musical thing that happened. And so I just sort of imagined Seattle, and then imagined Everett, and then people being like, Everett, music from Everett, that's probably not very good. But I enjoyed it and I thought it was really interesting. And so the seed was already planted. I ended up buying a small radio and keeping it in my dorm and listening to KSCR, and discovered an electronics show on Friday nights called The Tunnel, which is still operating and that I now DJ for.
That's awesome.
I went to Japan shortly after my time with the Abraham Lincoln, and when I was working in radio and broadcasting, it really dawned on me that I really wanted to continue working in radio. And all I was doing in my free time then, too, as you might know, is going out, seeing shows, going to numerous record stores and just throwing my money at stuff, reading a ton of books all the time, and just being a real head about everything. And so that was my thinking, was originally I'm going to go back to KEXP in Seattle and dominate and become a DJ, which is a very naive thought. And so I did. I tried, and they told me that I'd have to work mailroom or
Hmm.
fold T-shirts for a couple years before they'd even think about putting me next to the DJ to hand them papers.
But actually, what you did, didn't you just go into a record store and you just said, hey, I want to manage your social media or something like that?
I did, and that was a real bold chancer move,
Yeah, I would
and
think so.
and it worked. I had a resume that said I've seen Damo Suzuki live, the lead singer of Can. I've also seen Kool and the Gang. I collect records all the time. I'm in the Navy. I've run social media. Let me just come in and do your stuff. And I ran into the manager at the time, an owner, and he really liked me and was kind of floored at my approach because it had a real audacity, I guess. Which is, maybe it's a veteran thing. I think it is, because when you're a veteran, I think you might get out with, it's like, I've got all these skills, I've got all this know-how, and I've got power, drive. I've got my core values: honor, courage, commitment. People know that. And you could just sort of go into that and see if it works. And for me, it did. It worked for an entire, I think, year and a half. I worked for Jive Time Records when I first got to town. Yeah,
And so, were you doing both, working at the radio station and Jive Time?
I believe there was some overlap, but around that time, I started school in Shoreline, and Jive Time was in Seattle, in Fremont. And if you live around the Northwest area or have been around here, you know that there's two main highways that go north and south, and that within the past decade or so, Seattle has been exploding in population, and rises in housing costs have dominated, and homelessness is becoming a real problem. And even just getting a place, for under $1,800, it's like 400 square feet, is going to be like incredibly difficult.
Yeah, yeah.
So I had tried to find an apartment in Seattle. It's just like I had prepared before I had left the military, and had a little nest egg saved where I might be able to get something downtown. But even then, there were much more needed and requirements. Even though that I could get a job at a record store, I couldn't exactly find a place to live. So I ended up in Shoreline, Washington, where I started going to my community college. And from that point, I became interested in Everett again. I still had an interest in DJing. I had tried my hand at it earlier, live and broadcasting, and I decided to go up and visit the same haunts that I was at when I was in the Navy. And I ran into the same people who were at that historic Everett show. although I didn't know it at the time. And this was at a venue down the street in Everett, Washington called The Anchor. And those very same people were trying to organize a new space for people to play at. And that's a whole other story in itself. But what was the question again?
No, I just asked if you were simultaneously working at Jive Time and the radio station, if there was overlap. So we went down that path a bit, but if you go back further, when you were first enlisting in the Navy, what made you go into the Navy? What drove you that direction? And then did you ever think that it would lead you down this radio path?
Well, when I was growing up in Ohio, there really wasn't much to do. I was a big reader, and I was at the library all the time or at used bookstores. And if I wasn't with friends or playing video games, I usually had my head in a book. And I didn't really have any aspirations for a job. I paid for my first 3 quarters of school. It was community college, Sinclair in Dayton, Ohio. And it was for graphic design, which carried over from a vocational school that I went to. And I was interested in it, but I didn't know how to apply it, and I really wasn't connecting with people around me so well. No one that really found a huge amount of interest in working with or creating something. I look back now and people my age who did things in high school where they just made videos with their friends and posting it to very early YouTube or starting small bands on MySpace and things like that. And I don't really have too much of that to look back on. So around then I was just kind of like head in a book and no real aspirations for work. And one day one of my high school friends mentioned that maybe we could join the military because I didn't really have too much money to continue my own schooling and I wasn't really going to find any support for it. And it did strike me that, I had family who had joined the military mostly through my dad's side. My grandfather was a yeoman in the Navy, and I'd seen pictures of him overseas, and he told me that he had a good time in his service and that it set him on a path that was good for him. But at that time, I just sort of saw it as a way out, and I kind of took it, I kind of sleepwalked into it. It just kind of made sense. I don't know. And at first, I did think I could apply my design and my design savvy to get a job, but originally I joined as a machinist. And I think after the initial boot camp and C school and A school, I kind of woke up a little bit and said, well, if I'm going to be in the service, I ought to try to cross rate and get into a job that feels better for me. And I think I started under the pressures of the military structure. I decided I really wanted to go that route.
And so did they make that convenient for you? Was it pretty easy to cross rate?
No, I had some troubles adjusting.
Okay. Let's,
uh,
let's go into that a little bit.
yeah.
How does the Navy react when you say you want to cross rate from a machinist into I don't know what your options were, what exactly you were thinking of going into,
Mhm.
but I know you ended up in mass communication.
Yeah. Well, originally when I was a machinist and I was going through C school, that felt okay. I actually did pretty well in my class, but even while I was going through C school, I was telling myself I don't really want to be on a submarine. I don't really want to be the one piloting the thing, which is something that machinists end up having to take a watch
Really?
position for. Yeah, is up bubble, down bubble, and being able to know how to maneuver a submarine.
That sounds pretty
And
awesome for like a few hours.
yeah, well, it sounded terrifying to me.
There's a little bit of that too. Yeah.
Yeah. But one thing that came out of it too was I kind of psyched myself out was when I was at the submarine school for being a machinist, there was a big plaque on the wall that said dedicated to MM2 Ashley. He was one of the last people to pass away in submarine service while on a sub, and I didn't pay close enough attention to it, but I did pretty well in my class, and I got first choice of orders. And the only submarine that I knew I wanted to be on was the San Francisco. And I thought I wanted to be on that submarine because it was a fast attack,
Hmm.
and I didn't really want to be on a larger boomer sub because I also heard that they just cut circles in the water. They don't actually visit foreign ports. And so my mind was, ooh, look, there's a fast attack submarine. I think I'm going to pick that one. Maybe I'll go someplace interesting on this submarine. And it's also stationed in San Diego, which sounds like a really fun place. And I get my plane ticket, and it says that I'd be heading to Washington State. I'm like, well, why am I going to Washington? It's like, well, you haven't really been paying attention, have you? You should have researched your submarine a bit better because it ran into an underwater mountain
Oh no.
uh, like 7, 8 years ago, and it's in dry dock right now in Bremerton, Washington.
Jeez.
And so it's like, yeah, I guess I really should have researched exactly what I was getting myself into. And it was either around that time or around the time I first showed up in Washington to be part of this submarine, which instantly felt like a stale environment, that I found out that MM2 Ashley, same rating from the same place of origin, Ohio, uh, had died on the USS San Francisco when
Oh
it had
wow.
crashed into an underwater mountain. Yeah. And so I didn't, it didn't really sit well with me. And they said that the repairs on the submarine were just about finished. It had a brand new crew. I think there was only one or two individuals that had actually been on the sub back when it had crashed. They had taken time off and come back to the submarine. And once again, I just wasn't fleshing it out. I wasn't really connecting with people who were in my group, and I didn't really like the idea of taking it out on its newly christened voyage, if you can call it that, uh, after it had crashed. But anyway, so I made it my duty to get off the submarine. I said I claimed depression and being suicidal, which at that time uh, people were doing in droves, including officers. And many left the submarine service on that, and they were given a chance. It's like, do you want to? I remember a master chief speaking to me saying, "You can be on one side of the blue line. Do you want to just leave totally, or do you want to go surface?" And I said, "Oh, I want to stay in the Navy. I want another chance. I think I can, uh, maneuver and find something a bit better for me." And I slowly did. I ended up working on the Bangor submarine base and doing odd jobs around the Trident SSB and submarines at the Bangor Delta Pier, and eventually found my way into a public affairs office that accepted a lot of people who were in the similar position as me or had injuries, uh, which is uh, something else I related to. Since I had been in boot camp, I spent an extra 9.5 weeks because I broke my leg in boot camp. And so I was in the GIMP squadron for a while.
Well, your first couple years in the Navy, those we're talking about the low
Yeah,
lights.
yeah,
That's
that,
what it is. You were pretty down in the dumps, huh?
yeah,
I didn't know that.
around that time, yeah. Uh, but eventually, I found my way. I worked with a very nice GS. Her name was Katie Eberling, who worked the public affairs office on Lower Base Bangor, and I said I was interested in cross rating into the mass communication field, and I said I can do graphic design work. So she put me to work on this InDesign template document that went out, I believe, every 2 weeks or so. It was called the Refit Review. And, it's your basic standard, Navy sheet that goes out that informs people what's going on. It has man on the street interviews. It has featured interviews of interest with people.
So it's a newsletter, pretty much.
Yeah,
Every
And
couple of weeks,
so
why not? Yeah.
yeah, and so I gave it a shot, and I was given a Canon camera, which is funny because I think the standard across the board is Nikon. uh, but they gave me a Canon camera to work with to take pictures of award ceremonies, and so I'd travel all around the base, and I really I really like the structure of how JOs and photographers mates and how they do their work. I like being told it's like you have to be here at a very specific time, take pictures, meet with this person, get all this general information, and turn it into a story or turn it into a picture and a caption to submit to two or three different outlets, and it really works for me. That's the sort of work that I really enjoy.
And then I think, I mean, you can word it however you would, of course, but I believe you kind of hit a jackpot,
Hmm.
um, and your career was just like on the rise when you got that assignment to Japan.
Yeah. Well, I'd even say that my time on the USS Abraham Lincoln was pretty good because it was shortly after I spent probably a year to almost 2 years on shore duty after I had left the submarine. And you know what? You can put as much as this in there as you want, but so I got a $5,000 signing bonus, right, for joining the submarine crew,
Not
and
too
I
shabby.
never, and yeah, for doing an extra year. So I signed for 5 years, and I didn't have to pay it back after I left the submarine, saying, you know what, I'm going to get out of here, and I went to shore duty immediately for 2 years, for a total of three, including my schools and um, boot camp. And so by the time that my orders came and I had officially cross rated, it took about a year of working public affairs and then working with people on upper base, Bangor, an entire crew led by Chief Laura James and a few people covering stories for Bangor, that I finally had made it. I had cross rated. Uh, and how that happens was the machinist community had to let me go, and the MCs had to accept my packet, my job packet. And so I had to present stories that I had worked on, photos that I had worked on with captions, and I believe some other design products that I had to come up with. And Chief Laura James and a few other people at Upper Base Bangor approved that package, and it was sent off to, where is that? I think it's a building somewhere in Virginia or Tennessee, actually.
Tennessee.
Yeah, Millington. Yeah, it's Millington, Tennessee. And I was waiting weeks and weeks. The place got flooded. A literal flood
With your
came
packet
through.
inside.
Yeah, and so I was waiting to hear that my stuff wasn't damaged, and I had heard too that if my package hadn't have been approved and I had been uh, taken out of the machinist community, then I would have been unrated.
And they would have thrown you wherever.
Yeah, then I would have been working with boatswain mates painting,
Yeah,
you
you would
know,
have been like Christian Garzone.
and then I had to do his route.
Right.
So just take another crack
Yeah,
at
he
it.
made it too.
Yeah. Yeah, Christian Garzone's a great guy and is definitely part of the up that that I got into later. But my documents weren't damaged in this flood, and I was approved, and I became an MC. And I remember being very very happy, especially at that point. And then I got orders shortly after that, and went to the Abraham Lincoln.
That must be where you met Adriana.
Yes,
Okay.
I met Adriana Genualdi, and
Such a
now
small world. I went to high
yeah,
school with Adriana. And then
she's great.
she was your boss then when you were on the ship, right?
Yeah, well, the first deployment we went out, and we had another Divo called named Robin, and and she was nice too. She was a
What's
good
a
Divo,
divo? What is that?
divisional officer.
Okay.
So we have the sort of the high up officer in the chain, He's usually a lieutenant commander or commander, and we had Lieutenant Commander Marks as our PAO, Public Affairs Officer, and then below the PAO is your divisional officer, and this is the officer that works more closely with your chief
Mm.
or chiefs, and like the PAO's, hobnobbing a lot with the other higher officers, and then your divisional officer is kind of more learning the enlisted side of life by working with chiefs and seeing what they have to put up with grunts like us.
To put up with. Yeah.
Yeah,
Tolerate.
and yeah, to tolerate. And Robin was a very good divo, and then but I really liked Ginny Waldy
Yeah.
when she showed up on the ship, and Andriana now, and yeah, we still chat every once in a while. I think she's in Italy right now, but yeah, she's great. And then when I was on the ship, I met a lot of people who would become very important to me, and I also found out that mass communication people, they really know their music and movies.
It's
They have
fairly common, isn't it? Yeah.
yeah, yeah, they have their preference because, yeah, I think this is another point of interest. A lot of people are bored or saw Sight TV watch as the sort of way to get away from general duties for a while. But what Sight TV was really excellent thing where we put out, 3 or 4 streams of movies on these tiny little cassettes to the entire ship, so everybody gets, to watch TV, all over the ship. It's like 3 or 4 personal channels that we run. And then we also get satellite feeds of the news, which comes in and out depending on where you are in the world. Uh, but Sight TV was a really cool part of being a mass communication person. And I forget where I was going with that. But
No,
I learned a
you're
lot of.
talking about how
Hmm.
MCs really know their music and film, and they
Yeah.
have their opinions. Jason Thompson, he's
Hmm.
got his own podcast that he runs, the Ear Candy Update. That you can find them on Facebook, and I know they've got a podcast that has been around for quite some time, and is definitely worth checking out.
Hmm. Ear Candy Podcast.
Yeah, Ear Candy Update, I believe, is what it's called.
Ear Candy Update. Very cool. Yeah, a lot of people have their opinions on music and movies, probably because it's saturated in kind of our work of what we had to set up for people. And I love being on the ship, and I also like being in an air conditioned space.
That's nice.
But yeah, to do your general work. But then when it came to photography, you get to explore around the ship, the aircraft carrier, and see plenty of things. And even when we were extended for 3 months extra on our second deployment, I didn't mind it too much. I tried not to get too down on it, but a lot of people were pretty bitter around that time.
Just being on the ship.
Yeah, for an extra amount of time, but
Yeah.
I was still trying to enjoy my work as best as I could, and um, I felt like I really did become, closer to being an MC than when I was working on shore duty, which was, just sort of like here's proof that I could do this stuff. But then when I still showed up to the ship, there were common things about my camera that I still didn't know that, I was lucky the chief didn't tear into me. Instead, just kindly taught me. It's just like, yeah, you don't shoot like this, you shoot like this. And as far as writing goes, I thought I was a pretty decent writer. I didn't get too many edits back, but when I did, they made sense. And worked on the public affairs view of things, and then yeah, 2 years went by pretty quickly after that. That was the only sea time I had to do was 2 years. And then after that, I was having such a fun time doing mass communication that I did an extra 2 at Yokota Air Base.
A dream assignment for a sailor.
Yes, I loved it.
And when you got there, we kind of threw you right into it. We put you
Hmm.
in charge of radio.
Right. I was sort of thrown right into it, which was great because it was like I forget how many hours the plane ride was, but we
Is it like a
but we
10-hour
immediately
ride?
but we immediately went to Coco's and got curry,
Oh my gosh, yes.
and which is always a blast. And yeah, just immediately went into radio at first, and Yeah, there were times like you can use and cut out whatever you want, but
Sure.
yeah, there were times when I tried to work with Therese, and she had so much school or like medical appointments going on, and I just didn't know what to do. And I remember when Carr came back, uh,
Kellen Carr. He was our first guest on here.
yeah, when Kellen Carr came back in, I think it was like a week or two where he took me aside, and he was just like, "Hey, man, you have to learn how to actually control your people." And he had just come back from the desert, so I'm like, "Oh, okay, I'm sorry." like,
Well, you probably
but
haven't had much experience managing other human beings.
no, I had not. Uh, you know, at that point, I don't think it was more like I was just working alongside everybody else, and people saw me as a good worker, and I was sort of
And
putting in.
someone who didn't check their inbox.
Right. That's right. Well, okay, sometimes I didn't check my inbox, and I could be a little, you know, spacey.
Like, oh, I gotta get on my email in the mornings.
Oh yeah.
What's the
What was
point of
that? That
that?
was Brogan, right?
Yes, yes, it
Yeah,
was.
yeah, bro. Oberlin, check your fucking email.
It was a
That could be
morning
the
meeting.
that could be the one explicit.
That's our one.
Yeah.
I think
Uh
that's a freebie. But
yes.
okay, but at that time when you came in, were we still building the radio shows at
Hmm.
that time, or was it already automated?
Um we were still we were always kind of building playlists and new clocks, and we had just started working with Dan Valor, right?
Yes.
He had just sort of showed up to the station. I forget if he got there before or after me, but I think it was around the same time.
It was, yeah.
And yeah, Dan Valor came in and he was just like, "This is amateur hour or whatever," and was teaching us how to build discs. And we were still working off of CDs for a lot of the time too.
Mm-hmm.
But when he came in with the new automation system, I very quickly sort of picked that up. There were a few mistakes. I remember one time I called for you, although I was actually quoting Job from Arrested Development. I said, "Michael," and it went out over the mic, and I was still hot.
Yes.
And you had
That
to
hot
run
mic
in
there.
and yeah, and he ran in and was like, you're live," and you know, click the button as fast as I could, take it off. But yeah, around that time we were still building shows, and I think I jumped into the afternoon show first. And
Which was probably good for your character, your personality, afternoon versus waking people up in the morning.
that's right. Well, the thing was, I never I never went off the playlist. I never went off the playlist. Not once did I go off the playlist. I was always pretty diligent about keeping with the material uh, that we were given. Every once in a while, I'd slide songs that we were playing around that time into a slot to get rid of another song, but rarely ever did I deviate from the playlist.
Sure. Or if you had to back time, and make sure that you add that last song that will fit before you get to, 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock, just so you because every show, every hour would start off with the AP update. We would take that from the satellite. So you had to
Mhm.
be off the air yourself right at 59:59.
Which mean you played a lot of Green Day. Uh,
Yes.
I think Green Day had like the 1 minute songs, 2 minute
Green Day, the
songs.
Ramones.
Yep, the Ramones had a song that worked out like that. One to avoid though was one instance of R. Kelly's "Trapped in the Closet."
You played that?
Uh, I think I did. I think I did at least one time. It's just like a 38 second or 40 second something, but I really needed to fill time, and so I thought, okay, this is probably just like a little instrumental or something. Quite the opposite. It was just a rambling spoken word piece about R. Kelly and a midget.
R. Kelly. So maybe, you were up on your music culture and history and production, but maybe needed a little more R. Kelly in the books.
Yeah. So I think that did prompt me to start watching Trapped in the Closet, and I got through the whole thing within a week. Uh, which there's a lot to it. I don't know if you've seen the entirety of Trapped in the
No,
Closet,
I don't
but
know what this is. I thought this was just a song.
oh no, this is an entire. Okay, this is something to jump right into then. Um, yeah, R. Kelly's Trapped in the Closet is a giant series, and I don't know if it would. I think it might have had a predetermined end, but after a while, he decided to just ignore that end and keep continuing these skits. And yeah, I don't know what else to put on it except you should watch it because it gets bizarre. The further you go down R. Kelly's rabbit hole.
So R. Kelly is artist of all sorts, musician, spoken word poet,
Yeah,
actor, evidently,
yeah.
improvisational actor, and
He's a multimedia jack of all trades. Yeah.
a criminal, depending on who you ask.
Hmm.
Gosh. Okay, so there were songs to
He's a
avoid.
saint.
And what was that like then? Because we touched on this a little bit, but learning how to manage people and be in this office setting, which I must have been kind of new to you.
Hmm.
What was that transition like? I think it's something
Um,
that everybody eventually has to get to in the military.
I for me it wasn't too difficult to try and do it. I thought I'd say I can be fair. I can be pretty fair with people. Um, but one thing that always sort of got on my nerves would be when someone has the job where you could say we're blessed with the sort of work that we're given,
Yeah, absolutely.
and when people don't feel like they're blessed with the work we're given, and like you could be cleaning planes instead, or be working a very late night shift in a hospital. I mean, that kind of irks me. And so I ran into that a few times where I'd just be like, look, actually, this is really interesting work, and it's very fun and not too difficult. Here, let me run you through it. And I almost had to treat it as just like, well, I can do it, and I actually enjoy my work. So, you can, come on board and see what it's like. And a lot of times when you're going through something as mundane, it has a lot of minutia, like, automation and
Mhm.
taking out one hyphen out of every single file,
Oh yeah.
so that they'll play correctly. You just need to convince them. It's like, look, you can play music while you do this. You can get through it as much as you can. Um, and maybe I wasn't so successful as a manager in that regard because I still ended up having to do most of it myself. I wasn't very good at delegating it down to other people and forcing them to stay or giving people ultimatums or things of that nature. Uh, at that point, I still saw myself as more of a worker than a manager, but I was at least happy that they were able to go out and do stories if they were in the broadcasting realm, and, something like that.
Which you got to do a little bit of. Maybe it wasn't your thing as much as being on the radio, but I know you had some fun with producing uh, news stories as well.
Oh yeah, I loved going out and doing stories. And at first, it was it was very interesting because you do everything yourself, and I love DIY sort of mentality where you're going out with everything and you have to do everything. So it's like you have to get the camera just right, you have to get your white balance right, you have to make sure you don't crop too close, keep everything out, and you need to make sure that the person you're speaking with is comfortable and competent and really wants to talk to you, or if you have the best person to speak to, get your levels right when you're miking so you're not popping all the
Mm-hmm.
time, and bring bug spray if you're outside.
Bug spray, or you'll be doing 20 minutes of recording a stand up over and over again, just trying to swat bugs. Yeah.
Yeah, that was interesting. I'm trying to think what my best and worst experiences of going out were. I think my best and one I still show people is my Dr. Seuss story, which totally rhymes.
Yes.
I was very happy with that one. Even my interview E uh, rhymes her part, which is pretty great. And then I don't really think I had too many bad experiences, except that one story. I think it was my last story. Maybe was doing a Boy Scouts retreat, and
Practically in the forest of Japan.
yeah, practically in the forests of Japan, and that's when I ran into the bugs. Uh,
That
and
was a
then,
lot of fun to watch.
mhm.
I don't know
And
if
another
that's out
one.
there anywhere. It's probably not. It should be.
Yeah, I've looked for it. Um, it's
You've
really
looked for it.
difficult.
If it was out there, you would know. You would have put it out there.
Yeah, well, I have looked for them. It's kind of difficult to find some of these stories. Maybe you can hook me up with a better way of researching and finding them,
I can see.
because I've saved a lot of them. I saved all of them actually on a hard drive that I've lost the cord for. And
Oh,
I keep looking for that
oh,
darn thing.
I see.
Uh,
Well,
but
the thing I noticed about you from the beginning is even though things aren't always preferable, they're not going so smoothly. You try to have fun with it all.
right, yeah, I'm a married jester. Uh, I try to have fun with everything and make it go my way. And when I find that I can actually be a foil to something, or bounce off things pretty well, I get the idea that I can stay. Like the radio station that I work out, that I volunteer for right now, is a treasure. I watched this documentary earlier that a friend got me onto. It's called Sex and Broadcasting. It has nothing to do with sex.
Or
Uh,
broadcasting.
yeah, well, it does have to deal with broadcasting,
Oh, okay.
everything about broadcasting.
Good.
But it's about this radio station in New Jersey called WFMU. And it's one of the last truly free form radio stations. And I've always liked things that are akin to counterculture, or, or total creative freedom. And this is a radio station that gives that. And its management from the top down feel that way too. That everything should be free, and they go off of a book that's called excuse me, Sex and Broadcasting, and it's by this author Lorenzo Millam, and he actually started Crab Radio in Seattle, which became KSCR,
Oh,
which is
wow.
where I'm at right now. And in this book, he says that a radio station is a place for the community to sing, dance, and talk amongst each other, or something like that. I'm paraphrasing, but uh, he says that basically a radio station should be interesting and not be a corporate interest. And right now, I had a secondary job this past summer. It went by very quickly for CBS, where I was a board operator for two small radio stations. One of them was a AM sports station, while the other was a Jack FM. If you've
Okay.
listened to Jack,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, of course we did. We had it
It's
at
a good
AFN.
mix, yeah.
Hmm. And so they play what they want, and it's totally automated music, and it pulls from gold discs,
Yep. All
which
the
is just like
classics.
all the classic hits. Which it's not a bad automated thing to have. It's just sort of it could act like wallpaper basically when you're driving. It's just like if you don't want to be bothered with the formats of other radio stations, Jack offers anything. It's up to chance. And but the problem with stations like that is that they own a range in an area that could otherwise be used for a community, or for people to get together and share things that are important with one another. And there was a time before the FM radio bands had to be the same nationwide. FM radio used to be very free from station to station. It wasn't until Lee Abrams came in the 1970s and created a standard FM format for all radio stations to get in line with. And if they didn't get on board with that, then they wouldn't get certain, I believe, government funding, and they were left to sort of toil for themselves. And a lot of stations went under because of that. But WFMU, Crab becoming KSCR, uh, KCRW, places like that are radio stations that have continued to operate. Even KEXP uh, have continued to operate through donor support and outside of a college realm. And it's very important that those sort of things still remain. One quick thing was Intercom, the company that owns most airwaves now, bought up 7 stations in the Seattle area, including the one that I worked at for CBS and 1090 The Fan, a sports station. I believe they're keeping 1090 and CBS as they are, but they've already changed the formats of a few other stations. I mean, it's a faceless corporation. I don't see them as evil, but it's like a couple rungs.
So is that sort of what pushed you toward separating from the military broadcasting, or were there other factors in that I mean, it was the end of your commitment, right? And
Mhm.
I'm not sure that you were necessarily a career Navy guy anyway. But
I wasn't.
what was your mindset going out?
My mindset going out was, I've grown up now pretty much by myself. I'm 30 today,
Yes,
and
happy birthday. If I
and
had
I
the
was
rights and the money, I could play the Beatles.
the happy birthday song.
Yeah.
uh, but I joined at 20, and I got out in 2014, and it's been 10 years since I went into the military. And I think how I've changed is, I've really been by myself a lot of the time, but I've always been in the company of others, and my mind has very much been shaped by people that I've served with and by people that I've met in my travels. And I've come to my own conclusions and philosophies about a lot of things. And yeah, I think I always knew that I'd leave the military, but there was a part of me that felt it was important to continue and reenlist for the extra 2 years to go to Japan and experience Japan. And it's some of the best times of my life were held there. Not just as far as forming skills and career path, but as far as immersing myself in culture. Like, I made many friends outside the gate, as Hisano would say. When I was there, I felt very, very close to people and to music more than I had since I had joined, and it felt very good. And I knew that I wanted to have that when I got out. Since I've come to Everett, Washington, I've been making new friendships and been gaining new skills in a career field that I knew that I'd really want to be in. And I found a place in KSCR that seems to match my ideals a lot.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So anybody who maybe wants to consider service in the Navy or other branches, what would you tell them?
I had a conversation with a Vietnam vet who works at the station the other day, and he said he joined the Navy because he couldn't bear the thought of pointing a gun at someone and taking the life of someone else, and that he would break down and that he'd fall to the ground. He wouldn't be able to do it. He would be of no use to the Army or to the Marine Corps. Not to say that that's everything you're going to do in the Army or Marine Corps, but that was the reason I joined the Navy myself, was because I knew I didn't really want to be in combat with other people. I don't like hurting other people, but I did feel that I could be supportive. And it's a strange time. It was a strange time when I joined too. Bush was on his way out, and I didn't know what war would look like now in 2018. But it's been, just about 20 years of, wars that people really aren't resisting as much as they used to. Instead, I find that a lot of people are fighting for their own personal and individual rights and the rights of very divisive elements, be them like race or gender, things that are still important, but I feel like they've really eclipsed something that's that we should be addressing more, which is why we fight and why we go to war, and whether you feel you'd like to support something like that or not. And I think those are questions you should address for yourself before you join the military. For me, I felt good supporting my military for a time, and maybe I was naive, but maybe I thought that war would end and we'd come to something a bit more steady. But it really just seems that once I got out again, we were just kind of in business. I don't want to be a downer about it, but
Well, is that something that was in your mind when you actually enlisted in the Navy? When your buddy was like, this graphic design thing in college
yeah.
may not be the best path for us at this moment.
Before we started talking, I was thinking about my own joining. Like, I went in with a friend who ended up not going with me. We were going to go into the buddy system together for the Navy, and then he dropped out at the last second. And the recruiter told me, "Are you going to let him stand in the way of, changing your life?" And I said, "No." and and it's like, yeah, you're right. I'm going to do it. I'm going to make the change. And for me, it's been a very positive change. It was tough and at times lonely, but I felt that it worked out for me. I think the goal is just really what would you want to accomplish by joining the military? If it's to go to school, I've been going to school with it, and I still end up in debt. But I've known people who have been going to school without the military, who are in their 30s, who are in nearing 80 grand in debt. And you're talking about serfdom. The price of enlightenment is forever serfdom if you do that. And your future is very your future is something you really have to consider because it's a very slippery slope. If you don't have a support system of family or friends and you are a loner type, then maybe the military or some form of government could be something for you. You could find a structure there, even a corporate structure, if you feel that you're suitable for it and it doesn't make your soul curdle. Like, then if it seems like it works for you, then you should probably do it. Yeah. But
Wade's getting dark here.
yeah, sorry.
And
Uh,
then anybody who is in and wants to make that transition out. I mean, you got
mhm.
out. Did you have a plan when you separated?
Yeah, I did have a plan. Uh, my plan was to go home, visit my family, travel across the country, and start working for KEXP. And apart from KEXP, I've changed that to KSER, which I found a rich history in.
And
And
you did
Everett,
that. You did what
yeah,
you set out to do,
yeah.
including
And
the travel across the country. I remember you stopped in, was it Montana? Is that South Dakota?
Wyoming.
Wyoming? What are the blurb up there somewhere in that
So,
region?
so here's a funny thing. If we can go into that, yeah. So I visited a writer in Wyoming who I would describe as an anarchist. He's an anarchist. He worked with SST Records and a lot of different punk bands, but he was also in business, you know. And he's he lives a lonely life. Not too lonely. I mean, he has family out there that's come out to live close by in Wyoming. He has a brother and some family, but he's from Illinois originally. I'm from Ohio. I found his writing very interesting, and I kind of wanted to live a life where I am surrounded by people who really truly make their own way and have a rugged sense of individualism, and which is something that I find important. Maybe not everybody finds important. Other people find a lot of social issues very important. and I do too. But I find that it's very important to that if you're going to be making your way, that you could find find people who are like you on the way. I found his life to be very interesting, so I stopped in Wyoming to meet this guy. His name is Joe Carducci. If you're interested, he owns his own book press. It's called Redoubt, and he has his own website that's called the New Vulgate. And he's written about 4 or 5 books. Um, and yeah, if you're interested, definitely look him up. If you're interested in SST Records, he put out names like the Meat Puppets and Sonic Youth and the Minutemen and Black Flag.
A lot of big
So
names.
a lot of big names in like underground rock world that are now kind of like common household names and common tattoos and common T-shirts and things like that. But he's also the guy that while I was working in radio at AFN, I was reading a lot and I learned about Lee Abrams and the FM format going national and from him. And he said that it was basically depriving musical culture of its oxygen by moving to that FM standard and instead nationalizing certain music. And this can quickly turn into hipsterdom or this as far as discussion goes, but it is important that uh, local music can thrive in its own way. But it's funny to think about it being in the 50s and 60s and 70s, seeing the transition from every place has its own flavor to we have a national format and we're bringing in everything from the UK and we're kind of like socializing ourselves based on styles and fashions that aren't really our own on a huge national level. So, I mean, take that for what it is. But, I mean, that's pretty interesting.
Yeah, and also you've got this is April. It's pretty much a whole month of celebrating record stores.
That's true. Yeah.
What I recently heard is cassette tapes are on their way back, which
Hmm.
I don't understand why they would be, but
Yeah.
it's not impossible. I mean, vinyl has surged in popularity the last uh what 10, 15 years. You have a collection of cassette tapes right there.
Yeah.
Those
There they are.
recently acquired cassettes or
Um, over the course of probably about 4 years. Yeah. There's more than that, too. I've got a big drawer. Um, but I have had tapes where I've just picked them up from Goodwill or tapes where I found them in record stores and tapes that some of my friends have put out too. So my friends.
so what's the importance of this? Why do we need to keep these vinyls and these cassette tapes and all of this alive?
Well, I don't think it's necessarily just about celebrating the medium so much as having a medium to put out. There's something interesting about touching and holding an object in your hand. That's different from just having folders and folders full of files on your computer. You can associate it more with a memory or with a place or something like that. It might
Yeah.
have some ectoplasmic residue on it.
Yeah, we have some great record stores here in the Phoenix area down here in Arizona.
Mhm.
They're fantastic, and there are a lot of them. And of course, part of it is that local business, supporting the local businesses as well. But at the same time, I pull up my phone and I just hit download. Or if I
Mhm.
have Apple Music, it's just a
Oh yeah.
monthly service, and I don't even need to keep it on my phone. It's just in their system. If that goes away
Mhm.
just overnight, if something happens and Apple crashes, I've lost everything.
Right.
If I
Yeah.
have a collection of records here, then I still have those.
Well, I'm not shunning digital music either. I think there's definitely a practical use for it, and I use Spotify. I've used Apple Music, and I think it's a good service. Um, it is interesting though, where the money goes. Like in Spotify, artists make nothing, But in Spotify's product, I read this in an article, they brought it up. It's like Spotify's product is Spotify. It's the ability to create playlists using music that you don't even own. You're just kind of leasing. It's like you've almost, chipped in a subscription for a licensing to play any music that Spotify contains in its library. And so you get to instead take automated playlists that it generates for you. And they have a small staff. I'm not sure how many people they have at Spotify, but that create playlists and moods just based on tons of music that's licensed out to them. And that money goes straight to the company. What makes tapes and vinyl never really went away. Uh, at a times it looked like it would, because especially around the time that the CD was developed, um, because the CD, has its quality is right down to a pinpoint. Like you have everything that you want on a CD, but it just doesn't have the character that a vinyl record does. And when you purchase a vinyl record, it goes directly to the store because they've bought it from a distributor. And the distributor got it from whatever company, like Sub Pop, for instance, around here is a big household name uh, in the Seattle area. And yeah, they've always been making records and CDs and tapes. And because they know that they can sell them, they can move them. And if they had just gave up, then they wouldn't make anything off of Spotify. They'd fold. Uh, Same thing with Apple Music too, like their ways of getting around sort of thing. So if you really like Sub Pop and their flavor, then you'd want to probably buy a record player or a cassette player. Which buying a cassette player, yeah, it's more faddish having a cassette player than it is having a turntable. But a turntable is really cool. And I was actually talking to Andriana about this because she sent me an article, or rather a podcast, about vinyl records and what it's like to play records instead of digital solid state music. You can stop the record with your fingers and slow it down and pitch its speed up and down, and and it's necessary to pay attention to it, because if you don't, the needle's going to end up at the very end of the record and just keep spinning and give you a clicking sound, or just a sound of dust, and you'll have to remember to flip it over. And there's printing on it and etchings on it, and it just has you know hundred hundreds of times more appeal than a file would. um but for a lot of people, it's not necessary to clutter up your space with so much, you know, entertainment.
They don't take up that much space. They're flat.
Yeah, they're flat. You can file them away. But
Yeah.
I mean, me, I'm a collector. I have a ton of tapes, and I've got a ton of records and DVDs just piled everywhere. I mean, nicely piled and kind of like a fun array, you know.
I actually need to get new needles for my player.
Mhm.
It just doesn't sound good right now.
I'm still working on needles that I had in Japan. They're still really good, and I have two ready to go just in case one fails. Um, but yeah, I mean, if you get a right pair of needles and turntables, those things are resilient. They'll last a long time, and I think it's pretty rewarding, especially if you are a person that listens to music and wants to I don't know, just keep it, just have it around.
Yeah, I like putting a record on the player and having it play throughout the house. And then I do have to go back, I have to flip it over, and I like being in touch with it that way rather than just hitting shuffle on my computer here. And
Mhm.
and it does. It sounds really nice. My kids love it too. They even like to go and change the records themselves. They'll go on and they'll put on some Dire Straits or Rolling Stones. These kids get it.
Yeah, Dire Straits, they sound really good on record.
Very
More
good. Yeah.
better than a MacBook Air. set of speakers. Yeah, there's a ton of great music coming out of Everett, Washington, and not a lot of venues to play at. So we keep hitting the same venues over and over, playing at each other's houses, and then the music gets taken into Seattle. But there's a lot of character to a lot of music around here. Um, and I would recommend checking out uh, some of that music. If you want, I could even send you a Spotify playlist um, with just some selections of different groups and people, and that you can post up with a link or something if you'd be interested in that. And yeah, on Spotify,
Yeah, I can do that.
something
What
like
else?
that.
Where else are you out in the public? You're on Spotify. You have people can follow you there.
Yeah, you can follow me on Spotify. I have a ton of playlists that are in my show. You can also follow me on Facebook. I have a page. It's called Last Exit with Wade T, and that's me. And you can check me out there. It's my radio show. It's Thursday nights, 10:30 p.m. on KSCR. You can also follow me on Instagram too. I always post things from around the station, and also KSCR 90.7 on Instagram is also a page that you can follow.
And do they stream the shows at all?
The shows are streaming at kser.org. We also have a radio replayer, so if you can't stay up to 10:30 at night, or you're not on Pacific Coast time and it just doesn't flesh out well for you, you could check it out on the radio replayer.
And again, just like what are people going to find on the last exit that they can't get elsewhere? What are you offering?
Well, a lot of the music is very personal, and like I said, I don't want you to just listen to my show. I mean, just head on over to kscr.org and listen to whatever you like. There's tons of great programming on there. Let's see, what is today? Today's Wednesday. If you were to tune in, it's not going to be Wednesday when they hear it, but I mean, Poptopia Parkway and From Here to Obscurity, Unmitigated Audacity, and then Clancy's Bar and Grill, A Good Time with Pat, my show, Last Exit. Then Henry J, one of my favorite DJs, does a show called The Stereo Wire. That's on Friday nights. Then followed by The Tunnel, an electronic show, and Soundopolis with DJ Go Away Sun.
DJ Go Away Sun.
Yeah, DJ Go Away Sun. She doesn't like the sun, she likes the rain.
Okay, SUN, not SON.
Yeah, SUN. Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. I guess it could be like, go away, son. Like
Yeah,
scat.
get out of here.
Talking to a young boy.
And you did a country show recently? Like,
I
is
did.
that a regular thing?
No. So every once in a while, I get asked to cover another person's show, and or they'll just put it out on our little private group page for the DJs, and so I'll have to create a playlist that would work out with their show programming. And there was this one show I did, which was Blue Moon Lounge, which is more like rootsy rock and roll, country, and some garage rock. And I thought, ooh, I'd really like to do that and show off a little flair that I normally don't get to show on Last Exit, which is all like electronic bleeps, bloops, and free jazz and like all this other stuff. And so, yeah, I took a chance on the country show, and it was really great. I just used to play things I used to hear on the radio when I was a kid, growing up in Ohio, and some garage rock that I had heard pretty recently. And it was around Christmas time, so a lot of the garage rock was Christmas themed.
Did you play any of your good buddy Trace Adkins?
Trace didn't make it, unfortunately. No. George Strait, Amarillo by Morning, which is really good song. I just watched the movie True Country with him in it. Yeah, which is pretty fun.
Yeah, it's a rodeo movie there.
Yeah. Yeah, he's got some acting chops. I played some Dwight Yoakam. He's always really good.
Also an actor, isn't he?
He's also an actor, and a good one.
Garth Brooks.
Yeah, Garth Brooks, too.
Garth Brooks with Loopy for a bit.
Mm-hmm.
Remember that alter ego he had?
Well, what was it? He didn't do a Snoop Lion, did he?
It's practically a Snoop Lion, which I don't think Snoop Lion is a thing anymore, is it?
No, he dropped that.
Chris Gaines,
Chris Gaines.
fictional rock star persona, created his alter ego for Garth Brooks. He's got the hair. He's got a little
Soul patch.
soul patch. Yep.
Yeah. I'll be sending you some links to
Yes, please do.
R. Kelly videos.
R. Kelly videos, or just anything that you want to get out there with the KSER. And
Heck yeah.
all right, cool, man. Take it easy.
All right.
Happy birthday.
Yeah. Thank you.
So I don't know what it is about recording with this mic in Audacity versus recording with this mic in GarageBand, where I do the intros and outros, but for some reason that episode, my voice is way too deep and kind of hard to understand, in my opinion. You'll have to let me know what it's like on your end as the listeners. But regardless, I think that was a fun episode. We'll include all that stuff in the show notes, things about KSER. We'll have some of the Joe Carducci, Sex and Broadcasting, and a link to Ear Candy Update that I mentioned, which is also a podcast by a Navy veteran that could be worth your time if you enjoy music and things in your ears. So with that, I want to say thank you to Wade T. Oberlin. That was an excellent conversation. I really enjoyed it. And we will have more next month with another veteran here on the Boots Off podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Please feel free to visit the Patreon account and contribute if you can, if you want. And we will see you next month.